Hello, I'm Samuel Sagan. Welcome to this portal, a package comprised of 2 talks and 2 practical sessions. In the first talk, I'll be setting the context for practicing meditation techniques using the third eye. I'll be discussing what meditation is about and the nature and functions of the third eye. After listening to this talk, you'll be invited to follow the 2 practical sessions which have been designed to give you a direct perception of the third eye. Then in the second talk, you'll find the information required to engage your daily practice of meditation, as well as indications of how to use the third eye in your daily activities. I'll start by telling you about my background. I was born in France, and since I had the good fortune of developing a passion for meditation right from my teenage years, I decided to give myself a solid footing to support my quest. I went to medical college, and I studied Sanskrit at the Sorbonne University. I also studied traditional Chinese medicine and learned from a Taoist master. I went on several long trips to India, studying under masters of Tantra, after which I completed a thesis for a doctorate of medicine on the topic of chakras and models of subtle bodies in Sanskrit texts. The French medical establishment isn't exactly into meditation, so I quoted my thesis with solid academic rigor. And to my surprise, the board of examiners, all of them distinguished professors and heads of hospital departments, received the thesis with enthusiasm. They awarded me a medal, as well as the title of faculty prize winner, and had me elected to the French Society of the History of Medicine. After spending some time practicing medicine in France, I dropped all activities and spent years doing nothing but meditation. Meditating from morning to night, 7 days a week. Sometimes in solitary retreats in the south of France, sometimes in ashrams in India. These were extraordinary years, packed with a punch of life that I would never have expected. Until then, my life had been moving very fast. I had 6 student cards, kept juggling between exams and escapades to India, served as a translator from English to French for Hindu and Tibetan masters visiting Paris, meeting amazing sages. When I began the full-time meditation, I thought the pace would slow down. After all, what could be less eventful than sitting still with your eyes closed in a hut, day after day? Well, it was exactly the opposite. The experience was one of exponential speeding up. More happened in 1 day of meditation than in months of ordinary life. People simply have no idea what's waiting for them inside. Meditation isn't just about relaxation. It raises the voltage of consciousness. It reveals completely new dimensions of yourself, levels of immense creativity, joy, and fun. Levels where you are alive, awakened, and, even more interesting, levels where you are. Just are. To be, to just be, is something that people rarely think about. People want to be happy. They want to be successful. They want to be rich. Sometimes they want to be parents or be of service. Things which in reality are more about doing than being. But who wants to be? Just be. This is not part of the common palette of aspirations. And yet, states of pure being are experiences of a phenomenal magnitude. They put you in touch with parts of yourself which have a flavor of infinity. The ordinary mind, like a light bulb, can only take so much voltage, whereas in a state of pure being there is total simplicity, zero entropy, zero resistance, and therefore the potential for infinite voltage. The physics of superconductors provides a powerful analogy. At normal temperatures, molecules in a gas or substance move randomly in all directions. Similarly, the ordinary mind is in a constant state of entropy, thoughts moving in all directions. But when bringing a substance to near absolute zero temperature, the movements of the molecules more or less stop. Zero entropy. Then, surprise, there is no freezing of the flow of electric current. On the contrary, the substance turns into a superconductor. The near-zero resistance enables huge intensities of current. Through meditation, the mind becomes still. But there again, surprise. At maximum stillness, there isn't boring dullness. There is being, an experience which Sanskrit texts compare to the rising of 1,000,000 suns. Just being. The Bible, in the second book of Moses, has the statement, "I am that I am," which directly parallels the Mahavakya of the Upanishads, Tat Tvam Asi. You are that. You may be living in a carbon-based biped's body that's not even 2 meters tall. There is inside you the potential for being, and therefore infinity, a mixture of total intensity and total simplicity. Infinity within limits. This is the nobility of the human condition. In our lives, we constantly hit limits, the resistance of the material world. Huge efforts result in so little achievement. Every day, we find ourselves one day older, and despite all attempts, perfection always eludes us. But inside a human being there is being, and being is a state of infinity. When I came out of my years of meditation, I came to Australia and founded the Clairvision School to provide serious training in the field of meditation and experiential spirituality. There are, of course, many people who teach one form of meditation or another, but altogether, there are not many places that offer systematic trainings covering both theory and practice, and teachings with depth, teachings that really lead somewhere. I also wanted this school to be a Western school, a school for the 21st century. In the last 2,000 years, the Western world, fair to say, has gone through something of a spiritual lobotomy. We have entire libraries of philosophical writings, but not many techniques aimed at a direct experience of spiritual realities. And so as a young man, I eagerly turned to Eastern teachings, looking for techniques. But after years of practicing techniques non-stop, one thing that became clear is that from one epoch to another, or from one cultural context to the next, subtle bodies, the blueprint of consciousness, undergo major changes. This means that, in order to reach the same state of consciousness, quite different techniques may be required. This is what led me to formulate the Clairvision techniques of awakening the third eye, designed specifically for the people of this day and age. The third eye is of course universal. In Sanskrit text, it is given a variety of names. For example, Jnana-chakshu, the eye of knowledge. You may also have seen it represented as a jewel on the forehead of statues of Buddhas. There are also multiple references to it in Western spiritual literature, as in the verse of the Gospel of Matthew. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is single, your whole body shall be full of light. Or take Neoplatonism, the stream founded by Plotinus in the 3rd century. When asked how the soul could return to a state of unity with the One, Plotinus answered, not with a carriage or a boat, but by shutting your eyes and awakening to another level of vision, which is in everyone, but which very few ever use. So, what makes the third eye so interesting for meditation? This question is going to lead us to discuss the very essence of meditation. An analogy found in Sanskrit text is that of the coconut. Coconuts have 3 eyes, 3 dark spots. If you try to pierce the coconut, you'll find that 2 of the eyes are blind. You can't go through them. Only the third eye, the one that is in the center and above the 2 others, can be pierced. The third eye is the one that leads inside, to the precious coconut juice. The Upanishads have another analogy. The body as a city with 10 gates. Of the 10 gates, 9 lead to the external world. The eyes, the ears, the nostrils, the mouth, the anus, and the urethra. The third eye is the 10th gate, the one that leads inside, not outside. Behind this there is a whole theory of consciousness. Through the physical senses, consciousness is externalized. It is drawn into the physical world. The experience isn't recognized because it is constant, from morning to night, from birth to death. Each time you open your eyes, your consciousness takes on a certain flavor that is conditioned by the objects of perception. The result is a certain gravity, a loss of essence. To better conceptualize this, picture a raging party held at your house with 100 guests. They are everywhere, not just in the lounge, but in every bedroom, every bathroom, even the cupboards. And the music is so loud that it can be heard 100 meters away. You may thoroughly enjoy the event, but when the guests go home, there's a certain sigh of relief. Now you can rest. Reclaim your space. Be yourself. But what if the party was to go on and on, for a whole week, for a whole year, for your entire life? You'd be turned into a facade, someone with a pretty smile at best, but no inner life and a serious problem of centering. The analogy sounds extreme, but it is a fairly accurate depiction of the loss of integrity caused by constant exposure to sensory input. Each time you hear a noise, each time you see an object or a person, your awareness takes on a certain shape or flavor conditioned by the object of perception. There are virtually no interruptions, apart from sleep, when awareness itself is interrupted. If, however, you go through the 10th gate and turn your consciousness inside, then there is awareness. Not awareness of external objects, just awareness. The movement is no longer centrifugal, as in being drawn into the external world. It is centripetal, consciousness turning onto itself, which is exactly what meditation is about. One of the key realizations is that in a meditation state, when consciousness turns onto itself, what happens isn't an internalization, it is a de-externalization. We're not talking about some strange gymnastics here, turning consciousness inside out. It is the world that constantly turns consciousness inside out, and it has happened so much and for so long that no one even notices it anymore. Through meditation, consciousness is restored to its original integrity, turned back onto itself. Then you can be. The third eye being the 10th gate, the one that leads into the inner realms of consciousness. It is perfectly logical to use it for meditation. It isn't just a chakra or an energy center on which awareness can rest. It is the switch for internalization, the gateway through which consciousness can turn onto itself. And from what we've discussed so far, you can easily deduct many of the benefits commonly associated with meditation. Meditation brings increased focus and concentration. This makes perfect sense. Difficulties of concentration have to do with the mind being drawn in all directions. You could call it a centrifugal malaise. On this, Sanskrit texts have a wonderful story. A rishi, a visionary sage, had brought up his son in a jungle hermitage and had taught him meditation. When the boy turned 13, the rishi decided to send him to Janaka to further his education. Janaka was a legendary figure in the Indian tradition, because he was not only a great sage but also a king, ruling over his nation with great care and wisdom. He therefore exemplified the fact that enlightenment could be obtained while living in the world, not just through being a wandering ascetic. When the son of the rishi arrived at the court, Janaka took a good look at him and said, what can I teach you? He started by giving the boy a test. He placed a bowl of milk filled to the brim on the boy's head and instructed him to walk around the palace without spilling a drop. For a 13-year-old boy on his first excursion out of the jungle, Janaka's palace was full of fascinating things. Statues, magnificent meeting halls with fine carvings on the walls, dancing elephants, beautiful courtesans. Besides, the boy was hungry. There were glorious smells of food and piles of sweets on silver trays. Yet the boy just walked straight on, undisturbed. He circled the palace, and on his return to Janaka, not one drop of milk had spilled out of the bowl. After this, Janaka spoke to him not as a child, but as a peer. "You can return to your father," he said. "There's nothing left for me or anyone in this court to teach you." You can regard this as a story about being. Having overcome the forces that draw consciousness out of itself, the boy had conquered being. Janaka, who, needless to say, was surrounded by fine scholars and was himself a man of learning, made a statement by saying, "You know yourself, capital S. What more could we give you?" A similar message can be read in the answer given by Diogenes the Cynic to Alexander the Great. Visiting Diogenes, who lived in an empty barrel in the suburbs of Athens, Alexander was in awe. "Is there anything I can do for you?" he offered. According to the legend, Diogenes answered casually, "Move aside, you're shading me from the sun." Alexander was so impressed that he later declared, "If I weren't Alexander, I would be Diogenes." Returning to the subject of spontaneous concentration, it isn't just during meditation that the third eye can be used to focus yourself. As it awakens, the third eye can be perceived as a flame of awareness burning in the background of your consciousness. It can then be used as an anchor during your daily activities. It brings an element of effortless focus and centering, whether driving, watching television, or even taking part in an animated meeting. Really, the centripetal polarity of the third eye offers an antidote to the hectic nature of modern life. If you think about it, many of the features associated with a stressful lifestyle create an exaggeration of the central problem, the loss of integrity caused by constant externalization. If one phone call can be enough to pull you out of your flow, then what will a whole day do to you when the phone keeps ringing, people keep knocking at your door, and the world solicits you in 1,000 other ways? From this perspective, it's easy to understand how meditation brings a cortege of benefits. Benefits that have been documented in numerous scientific studies and include reduced stress, improvements in a number of conditions such as high blood pressure, insomnia, or eating disorders. A psychology experiment of a different kind, but which I found particularly revealing, was one in which 2 groups of rats were given both water and alcohol to drink. The rats of Group A, which were left in peace, didn't touch the alcohol, they drank only water. The rats of Group B, which were exposed to random electric shocks, not only displayed aggressive behavior, but also drank more and more alcohol, less and less water. If this experiment stuck in my memory, it's because as my third eye awakened, I often felt like an escapee from cage B. When the third eye is active, it creates a smooth inner environment in which the input from the senses reaches you, but doesn't hit you. By comparison, life in the ordinary mind hurts. There is no padding, nothing to digest external impressions. Crude, unrefined material is poured into your consciousness in a way that constantly jars, as if you were receiving electric shocks. During daily activities, the third eye acts as a filter. Through spontaneous awareness, external noise and entropy are reduced. Another experiment I always found fascinating is one in which the brain waves of a cat are registered on an EEG machine. A bell rings. A set of spikes is registered in the cat's brain waves. Now, put a mouse in front of the cat. Riveted. The cat sees nothing but the mouse. The bell rings again, just as loudly. Again, there's a modification in the cat's brain waves, but it is nowhere near as intense as the first time. This experiment, like the Sanskrit story of the son of the rishi, illustrates the power of spontaneous focus. In a state of spontaneous focus, your efficiency increases. You move through your tasks faster and with less fatigue. There is less resistance to overcome, as in the analogy of the superconductor. Watching people at work, by the way, it is easy to see that they are being slowed down by mental entropy. In the middle of a task, and even more when finishing a task and starting another, there are blanks, moments when people come to a standstill. Due to random thoughts passing through their mind, they temporarily lose their thread. The third eye is an organ of awareness. It not only simplifies your state of consciousness by reducing the entropy of the mind, it provides a spontaneous focus that keeps you on track. And as the transformation takes place inside you, there's the perception that a certain mental gooiness is being overcome and gradually replaced by a fantastic clarity. From murky pond, the state of your consciousness turns into clear sky. All sorts of games that people play tend to drop by themselves. Emotional games, mental games, and convolutions of all kinds. Clarity means no nonsense. Seeing things just as they are. Seeing yourself just as you are. The Clairvision techniques of course lead to an opening of subtle perception, but in essence what Clairvision stands for is clarity vision. This clarity that is extraordinary through its simplicity, and that forms the foundation for self-knowledge. Before continuing, let me tell you a parable, the myth of the ants. Do you know how ants conceptualize God? God is an ant that is not only huge, more than 10 centimeters long, but also has the shiniest legs one can possibly imagine, as well as absolute mandibular strength. Now, let's picture an encounter between you, great angel, and an ant. Close to the ant heap there happens to be a spiritually inclined ant in quest of self-transformation. It turns to heaven and calls, "Help!" You find this most unusual and interesting, so you decide to engage the communication. Like Alexander, you ask, "Is there something I can do for you?" Thinking of its problems, the ant immediately answers, "Yes, my middle right leg is getting rusty. How could I possibly become divine with a rusty leg? Please help, and give me mandibular strength." Now, examining the ant, what do you think its problem really is? The rusty leg is irrelevant. The ant's real problem is that it is an ant. It is locked in its own level of reality. It can't even conceive what divinity is about. And so the greatest gift you could make this ant is not mandibular strength or healing its leg. It would be to give it a taste of something else, an experience of expansion that transcends the limits of antness. Similarly, when thinking of spiritual achievements such as all the benefits of awakening the third eye, there is always the danger of remaining locked in the concepts and aspirations of the ordinary mind. You could call this spiritual rationalism. It has to do with painting a picture of enlightenment in terms of moral qualities and desirable mental and emotional attributes. Sure, you want to prevent high blood pressure, be more efficient at work, and be a nice person. But at the same time, what's the point of getting out of cage B if it's to end up in cage A? To a rat, of course, cage A is infinitely more desirable than cage B. But is it really? In cage B, at least, you feel the burning need to get out. In cage A, you just sleep. Life goes on. The third eye, and meditation in general, aren't about turning uncomfortable limitations into comfortable ones. They're about getting out of the cage, expanding your universe. When activating the third eye, an awakening of perception takes place. It begins with what you could call a systematization of intuition. For many people, whether they acknowledge it or not, intuition plays a key part in decision-making and creativity processes. Then, of course, they use the rational mind to support their choice, as in the decision-making computer of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, who first asked you which decision you had made, then found all the reasons why this was the right choice. Most people have no inkling of how inspiration comes to them, the nuts and bolts of intuition. It just happens. Same with creativity. If the flow is there, then the artist creates. But on those days when there is no flow, creativity block, then at best writers and artists know how to take side measures. Inspiration isn't really an act of will for them. Being the key to inner worlds, the third eye can take you to fountains of creativity. Instead of just passively receiving inspiration, you then become capable of actively drawing from archetypal levels. To describe this, the Rig Veda uses a colorful expression, to milk the celestial cow. Those who are familiar with Plato will find in his theory of forms a model for conceptualizing the active creativity engaged with third eye awakening. In Plato's model, the forms are the archetypal blueprints of all manifested things. For example, sphereness is the form of all spherical shapes. Through inner vision, the forms can be contemplated. Incidentally, the Greek word for form is eidos, from the root eido, to see. And according to Plato, any act of intelligence, any act of creativity, rests on an intuitive perception of the forms. With the awakening of the third eye, there also comes a greater artistic sensitivity. Life is revealed in colors. The most simple bush becomes a fascinating work of art. There are non-physical colors in the aura, as described by esotericists, halos around trees and plants, as well as animals and people. Non-physical colors are of striking beauty. Ever since my vision awakened, this has been a topic of wonder for me. As a child, by the way, I had zero non-physical perception. To me, third eye vision wasn't some kind of gift. It was the result of patient and systematic cultivation. As a young man, I often wished I could have been more gifted. But later, I realized it was precisely because I had to go all the way that I could design techniques for people without any special gift. A path where the only indispensable requirement is perseverance. And so as my third eye was awakening, one of the things that struck me the most was the beauty of what I was discovering. Every tree became like a poem that told the story of the creation. A tree is like a world of its own, with a magma of colors held in the structural framework of the branches. There are forces moving in all directions, softness and strength, layers of wisdom upon layers of life. And behind the most humble creatures of nature, you discover a meaningful world of shapes and colors. Many insects, for example, are perceived as resonating with forces from distant spaces, mathematical forces of great rigor and integrity. The night sky becomes a topic of endless wonder. Seen through the third eye, the light of stars takes on dimension. It turns into an intricate artwork, combining physical and non-physical colors of exquisite subtlety. Compared to this subtle range of perception, ordinary vision feels flat, as if you only saw postcards and never the real thing. Another difference is that the consciousness of the ordinary mind is separative in essence. When people are locked in their mind, they have no idea what other people feel. The ordinary mind makes you live in a state of isolation. Whereas when tuning into people, animals, plants, or even stars from the third eye, there gradually arises the sense of a profound underlying unity. You are no stranger to the creation. You gain an intuitive perception of what other beings feel. Experiences of communion with nature could be taken as example of this expanded perception. But then again, through the third eye, they stop being isolated flashes that arise randomly. They become systematic because they are actively mediated. Nature becomes a different world, full of unexpected discoveries. For example, once, when a whale was visiting Sydney Harbour, I took my kayak and went to spend the morning in its company. I was lucky. The whale stayed in about the same position, so I could spend a few hours less than 30 meters from it, just tuning in. I had read several times about the echolocation used by marine mammals. Echolocation operated through an organ situated in the forehead. What struck me on that day was how closely integrated with third-eye perception this echolocation is. Close to the whale, I could feel myself being third-eye scanned, over and over again. The experience bore the unmistakable characteristics of a third-eye space, but mixed with the huge, out-of-the-worldly presence of the whale. That day, the whale wasn't especially communicative. It was just busy doing those things that whales do. But in numerous other situations, I have seen animals become incredibly responsive when you tune into them from the third eye. In the tablelands of New South Wales, at a retreat center of the Clairvision school, there used to be an eagle that came to visit. At times, when tuning into it, there was the clear perception of a third eye lock, communication. Then I would raise my arms and slowly start turning. The eagle would start moving too, facing me, holding the third eye lock. And we would dance together, as if in celebration of some ancient mystery. The eagle's consciousness resonating with my eye was an experience of massive vastness, beyond anything the ordinary mind can conceptualize. An experience out of the cage. Other animals which I found particularly responsive to third eye contact are horses. People who are into horse riding know that a great degree of intuitive communication can take place with a horse. Through the third eye, these exchanges become particularly clear. You feel this consciousness locking into your third eye, and suddenly it's as if you were standing in front of a person. The horse lets you feel what it feels, with stunning tangibility. Close to rivers in many regions of Australia, a common animal is the water dragon, a sort of lizard 1 or 2 feet long. It's a very ancient creature which, like the tuataras of New Zealand, happens to have a physical third eye. Called the pineal eye or the parietal eye, it's a slight protrusion under the skin of the top of the head. Water dragons are very shy creatures. As soon as a human turns up, they jump into the water and hide. But if you approach them in a state of third eye awareness, then it's a completely different story. The water dragon just looks at you. The best term I can think of to describe this is third eye lock. Then it's as if you were in another world, out of the mind, out of the cage, in a state of vastness, incredibly ancient and sacred. Then the dragons treat you completely differently. They are no longer shy. They come and eat from your hand. Sometimes they even come and sit on my lap. There is something particularly moving in being approached by a wild creature. It makes your heart shine. It unlocks flows of empathy. And you could say the same of many third-eye experiences, perhaps because they unveil this underlying unity between you and the world. They make it easy and natural for empathy to flow. This is a good opportunity to address a question sometimes asked about this work. Why start with the third eye, not with the heart? Something I would invite you to reflect on is that, in English, there is a certain amount of confusion associated with the term heart. There's the heart, which is the physical organ that pumps blood into your system. There's the heart center, or heart chakra, located in the middle of the chest. And then there is heart quality, or heartness. Heartness and love, however, aren't specific to any particular body part. Love is transcendental in essence. It isn't the exclusive prerogative of any chakra. Love can shine through any energy center, and vice versa. Not everything that comes out of the heart center is loving. The heart can also be the seat of violent emotions, jealousy, or hatred. Right from the start of your spiritual endeavor, it's therefore essential to not let yourself be fooled by words. Heartness does not specifically belong to the heart center in the chest. Confusing the two would be like describing a loving friend as a person of chest, or someone with such a big chest. So the third eye isn't some kind of head organ as opposed to the heart. It is the gateway to inner worlds. Precisely, it is by crossing this gate that people can get out of their head and engage true heartness and flows of empathy. To conclude this presentation, an aspect I would like to emphasize is that the third eye paves the way for experiential forms of spirituality, where you can know for yourself, see for yourself. In this work, you're not asked to believe anything. Belief is actually seen as counterproductive. What this world needs isn't people who believe in spiritual worlds, but people who experience them directly. This approach leads to non-dogmatic forms of spirituality, where it's up to you to make discoveries and decide on the nature of reality. That doesn't mean that there is no place for models or theories. Clairvision courses such as the Knowledge Tracks present many models relating to subtle bodies, non-physical worlds, angels and high spiritual beings. But ultimately what matters is your direct experience, not what's in the book. The models are there to facilitate experiences. They suggest directions to be explored. They act as a map. But the map isn't the territory. If in the end what you perceive is in contradiction with the model, then change the model. At the Clairvision School over more than 10 years now, I have trained a large group of people who, through a variety of processes starting with awakening the third eye, have engaged in a systematic exploration, a mapping of consciousness. Inner perceptions aren't vague and beyond communication. Through practice, they become as tangible as physical perceptions. People can therefore compare their observations in what can be regarded as the beginning of a science of consciousness. This can give you a glimpse of the scope of this work beyond only individual benefits. The fact that we live in a materialistic world has a lot to do with the fact that very few people have a direct perception of non-physical realities. If this were to change, if an increasing number of people were to activate their third eye and cultivate experiences of expansion of consciousness in systematic, reproducible ways, then the very foundations of our culture would be shaken. If spirituality were to become a science, then science would become spiritual, which could usher in a completely new civilization. Now, having listened to this talk, the next step is to go through the practical sessions. For this you'll need to be in a quiet place, either on your own or with other people who are following the session. The first practice will work better if you do it when you're rested. A Saturday morning, for example, at the start of a quiet weekend, will be infinitely preferable to an evening after a long day at work. Seal the space for the duration of the session. Disconnect the phone. Don't let anyone walk in and out of the room, and make sure you won't be disturbed in any way. In order to induce third eye perception, the practical sessions use music. You'll therefore get better results if you use a good sound system. Headphones are not advised. This doesn't apply to the talks, only to the practicals. The reason is that you'll be invited to practice a diffuse form of listening, receiving sound vibrations from the third eye, not just with your ears. There is no fixed indication as to the time span between practical sessions 1 and 2. You could do one in the morning, one in the afternoon, or one on Saturday and one on Sunday. You could also do both in a row, with a short break in the middle. It's recommended, however, that you complete both practical sessions before listening to the next talk.